Martin Luther King birthday observances, the significance, the co-opting, the contradictions. Voting rights and what it means for Black folks in particular. PNM Avangrid heads to the state Supreme Court after their defeat. On the governor's agenda, hydropower for our state. Where's the water coming from? Great music, and our expert panel tackles the topics of the day. Good morning, Albuquerque, and welcome to another edition of That Saturday Show, your source for social justice news and discussions. All brought to you by the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice, your voice and your advocate for what is good and what is just. There's a lot going on in our city, in our state, and around the country, and we're going to get to as much as we can in this show today. Let's start off with a reminder that COVID is no joke, y'all. And New Mexico is currently in the red zone for new cases. That's not good. Get your shots, get tested as often as you can, and above all, follow the safety protocols of masking, distancing, and washing your hands. Keep yourself safe, keep us all safe. Let me get this off my chest. I never dreamed that nearly 60 years after the voting rights bill was signed by Lyndon Johnson, that we would be right back here again, fighting for protecting our right to vote. But that's exactly where we are. Nationally famous radio commentator Joe Madison is approaching 3 months of a hunger strike to keep the pressure on Biden and the Congress, and it shouldn't have to come to this. We are grateful to Brother Madison all the same. Obviously, the Confederate cult party is moving full steam ahead in at least 19 states, hell-bent on making it harder or even impossible for Black and brown people to exercise the right to vote. But as the Senate attempts to enact legislation to protect against these suppression laws, it's Democrats that are blocking the measures to make passage possible. Say the names, Manchin and Cinema. Yeah, those are the ones. The gerrymandering in red states and the so-called Democrats who are doing this, it's all got to stop, and Manchin and Cinema need to go. There's a bigger question out there, however. How much longer are we as Black folks in particular expected to deliver the vote in support of the Democrats, only to be ignored, overlooked, and deprioritized after the Dems win? Maybe we need to create a new party and make the Dems come to us begging for those votes. This is definitely not a call to join the Confederate Party either. I'll die and go to hell broke before I throw my support to that evil cabal. But Dems need to feel the heat from within. After Biden got elected, the Black agenda was pushed to the back burner. The disillusionment is already showing consequences, with Black support for the Confederates increasing in the last year from 11% to 16%. That is definitely not a solution either. Sound the alarm, but take action and send a clear message that the games have got to stop. Our patience has run out. Cut us in or cut it out. Now, I talk about Black folks a lot on this show, and rightly so. New Mexico is stuck on this state being a so-called tricultural state that never mentions us. Our financial and cultural footprint, however, are far greater than our actual numbers, and we will not be ignored or overlooked. We continue to be attacked in the public schools and minimized in job hiring and government appointments, and the system that must be changed just rolls on with too little being challenged. We have an obligation to raise our voices and demand equality everywhere. Stay woke. Now, before we go on, I want to extend an invitation to you viewers. because in the next week we're going to be announcing a scheduled blood drive. And we want you to call us at 505-268-9557 for details. There's a shortage of blood, and the Peace and Justice Center will be conducting a blood drive. So be sure to get in there. I am so honored today because my co-host for the opening segment is the fantastic, hardworking, and on a tight schedule, Miranda Viscoli from New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence. Miranda, welcome to that Saturday show.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you hung in here with us today. Yeah. So, Miranda, in the little time we've got, I'd like to just hone in on some really important topics like what's on the 2023 agenda for New Mexicans to prevent gun violence and all the other things that are going on, and really comment on this rising tide of youth violence that's just gripping our communities all over the place, and what's happening with that.
Well, New Mexicans Prevent Gun Violence, the majority of the work we do is with youth, as well as legislation. Gun violence in New Mexico and in the state is a multifaceted problem that demands a multi-pronged approach. It's also a civil rights issue because the majority of people who are being shot and killed and incarcerated are people of color. So we need to figure out what we're doing wrong, and that's on us, right?
Yeah.
And so we really do look at gun violence prevention and we look at gun violence as a civil rights issue, and we need to. So as I said, the majority of the work we do is with youth. We're seeing an uptick of kids and gun violence, and again, I think that's on us as a community. When a 16-year-old has access to a semi-automatic handgun and a bag of meth in the other hand, we need to ask ourselves, how as a community have we failed that child? Because we have. And we're failing them over and over, and we're getting a real uptick in gun violence with our youth. I think there are a lot of programs that we can implement, like the Violence Intervention Program they're doing in Albuquerque. I would love to get that in every city in New Mexico, as well as continue creating spaces where our youth can talk about gun violence. The 90% of the youth we talk to have experienced gun violence, know somebody that have. They're scared, they're frustrated, and they're beyond confused as to why the adults in this state are doing so little to help them. So one thing we'd like to make sure we do is create a space where they can actually talk about this.
Sure.
Where they can talk about their ideas, where they can help us solve this problem, because their voice is imperative when it comes to gun violence. In terms of what we're working on at New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence, obviously for 2022, we're not looking at any type of legislation.
Short session.
Yeah, short session, election year.
Right.
There is a child access prevention bill out there. We are very much in support of child access prevention. That specific bill we probably wouldn't support because it's too weak for us. We want to make sure that it works. But what we really want to see, and we've spoken to the governor's staff about this, is creating an Office of Gun Violence Prevention and Intervention.
Great.
And when we look at what we want to do in the legislature, we really make sure it's on the side of prevention. We do not want to ever pass something that will put more people in jail. Like that we cannot incarcerate our way out of this. And we keep trying to incarcerate our way out of this. You know what? It hasn't worked. Have you looked around?
That's
it's
right.
not working at
That's
all, right?
right.
And so what an Office of Gun Violence Prevention would do is that it would allow us to work on the prevention side. For instance, violence intervention programs. Get those throughout New Mexico. It would also allow us to collect data. It could also allow us to help on suicide prevention. So
yes.
I think this year 64% of our firearm deaths were suicide. And so getting the gun shop program, which is a great program in all of our gun shops in New Mexico, where they, before they sell that gun, recognize the signs of suicidal ideation and don't sell that gun. I mean, there's so much we can do in terms of prevention. And I think that's the direction New Mexico needs to go in and the United States.
I was looking at the high school situation, La Cueva High School recently, and we're both working on that to see what we can do. And the messages that have resonated with me most have been, what can we do to build an infrastructure in the schools where kids can talk freely, talk without fear of reprisal, and know that they're being heard.
Right.
And that's one of the biggest challenges is, it's this regimented kind of thing. You will come in and you will sit down and you will listen to what I have to say and you will go home. Mm-hmm. And any divergent from that, is just unacceptable. That's not what we need. Kids need sanctuary, and they need to feel safe, and they need to feel as if they're being heard. We're not doing that.
No, we're not at all. And one of the programs we have at New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence is a program called the Student Pledge Against Gun Violence, where we create, again, that space where youth can talk about the issue of gun violence, and then we help them create an event. So it's all youth-driven at their school, so that, because the students all getting together and talking about gun violence prevention and about what they're going through, that actually helps, and it helps create an environment where hopefully some young person does not put that gun in their knapsack. Right. And how do we, also help scaffold our youth so that they care. They have they do care about each other, but to create space where they can care about each other and say, no, we're saying no to gun violence. It's not making any of us feel any better. It's endangering our lives. Peace is a collaborative process. How do we collaborate so that our youth can have a place to message that out? And that seems like a small thing, but I can tell you it's not a small thing.
That's
when
huge.
we work in these schools.
That's huge.
It changes. We have, not we, but just we've had the opportunity to do these programs, has turned some of our youth's lives around, and they don't want anything else to do with a firearm, and they didn't come in like that.
It's all about them feeling safe and feeling like they're being supported.
And heard.
And
give them a voice.
Yes.
We're always just telling our kids, get over it, move aside. No, support them, give them a voice. And I do think also we need restorative justice in our schools.
Yes, absolutely.
And that takes training, and that takes
training.
Time away from geometry class. Well, too bad.
That's right.
Nothing against geometry, but I think we need to spend time on restorative justice.
Yes, absolutely. Miranda Viscoli, New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence. Thank you so much for being with us today. This is a subject that we can keep talking about, and we want to have you back.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to Good News News. I'm your correspondent, Hassani Olujimi. Our first story comes from our good friends right here in Albuquerque, KRQE Channel 7. This story will truly have you high in the sky. Let's take a look.
When the COVID pandemic ravaged the Navajo Nation and tribal lands early on, one group started to figure out how they could help.
The headlines were, Navajo Nation Native American people are higher risk. And we really got a team together and figured out why is it higher risk. And we put these scenarios together and connected the dots. Well, it's because of lack of access to healthcare.
Mark Atlin is a member of the Apache Nation and grew up in Gallup. He's now behind the mobile medical startup ZapCare, with a founding team made up of fellow Native Americans.
Vans, trucks, trailers, and they'll be equipped with doctors, nurses, and they'll have medical equipment to do eye exams and urgent care.
They're working on getting that basic preventative care to the Navajo people, hoping to eventually expand to services like dental and cardiology. Now they're even launching a drone service which will bring much needed medicines and emergency supplies to those in remote areas on the nation.
Especially during the harsh winter months, where we'll deliver pharmaceuticals, so medications such as insulin, hypertension medication, to individuals that can't get out of their driveways or in super rural areas.
Throughout the entire process, the ZapCare team has worked with Navajo Nation Vice President Myron Lizer, who calls the idea out of the box.
In a pandemic, there's just so much need.
He hopes others will also bring their innovative ideas to the nation and additionally strengthen its economy.
That there's some other opportunities that, again, those companies that are looking to move to another area.
Eventually, Atlin hopes to expand to communities beyond the Southwest, keeping in mind the traditions and practices of the people they serve.
Culture-based healthcare, right, where our physicians understand the communities that they're operating in.
Now, isn't that good news? This medical drone delivery service will launch on January 22nd. Now, our second story comes from our good friends at Positive Listicles. It'll have you in stitches. Let's explore a little more.
While quilting bees generally conjure images of grandmas piecing together scraps of fabric to create family heirlooms for future generations, crafting the colorful, cozy bed covers has become an outlet for incarcerated men, not only to express their creativity, but to give something positive back to the communities from which they came. Over the past 10 years, more than 2,000 personalized quilts assembled by the inmates of Missouri's South Central Correctional Facility have been donated to children in the state's foster care system or auctioned off to fund local charitable organizations. When I learned that I could help bring a smile to a child's face, I was all in, said Fred Brown. William White, an upholsterer by trade, felt a special affinity for the project and joined soon after he began serving his sentence in 2015. Along with his other prison chores, White volunteers to spend 7 hours a day, 5 days a week quilting with his peers. Based on the precept of restorative justice, which stresses rehabilitation rather than punishment, keeping the prisoners' minds and hearts engaged, while letting them feel like they're making useful contributions to the community, has been a game changer, even for those who may spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Knowing firsthand the feeling of being forgotten by society, the inmates who participate in the quilting circle strive to personalize each quilt for foster care kids to let them know someone cares, that they're not throwaways.
Now, isn't that good news? The other day I was taking a nap and someone pulled the covers off of me. Don't worry, I recovered. You can't win them all. Let's check in with our favorite sassy grandmother, Little Big Mama. What do you have in store for us today, lady?
Thank you, Hassani. I just want to ask your viewers, what did the nose say to the finger? Quit picking on me. But seriously, baby, 2 cows were grazing in a field, and one cow said to the other cow, "Aren't you concerned about mad cow's disease?" And the other cow looked at him and said, "No, why should I be? I'm a helicopter." Bye, baby.
As we always say, the best way to turn a frown upside down is to get goo-goo for good news. I'm your correspondent, Hassani Olujimi, and I'll see you right here next time on That Saturday Show with more good news.
So we are happy today to be talking to Mariel Nanasi, Executive Director of New Energy. And this is a very exciting time in that she brought about a major victory here for the people of New Mexico. Welcome, Mariel. Welcome back to That Saturday Show. It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Jim. It's so good to be with you.
Oh, so tell us, this is such great news. I jumped out of my seat when I heard about it.
Yeah. The big deal is that basically Avangrid and Iberdrola, the parent company, could not overcome their own track record of outages and unreliability, diminished service quality, and more than $63 million in penalties and violations. And their failure to abide by commission rules and law. And one of the things that the commission raised that was really important was that they were afraid that Iberdrola and Avangrid were not coming here to serve New Mexicans, serve PNM customers, but that right. What they were really after was to, this was amazing because sometimes, during cross-examination, witnesses actually forget that they are supposed to come across a certain way, and they just become truthful. And what happened is the CEO of Avangrid, and his name is Robert Kump, he just sort of was gaga with money, like there's cartoons that make that like makes your like eyes pop out of your head with dollar signs in it. That was like what he was. That's what it was. And he was saying, you know what? We're going to use PNM as our beachhead. And I was like, wow, what a term. So I like looked it up because I really wanted to know exactly what that term means. And it's a military term to land and from that landing attack your enemy.
That's right.
And basically he said, I want to use PNM to then go and get everything else. And what is everything else? To essentially create what they call affiliates, which are like baby companies, and to consolidate the market. That's what he was just, you know, that he was just like in that sort of money fever or fervor or both, and say, we want to consolidate renewable growth for our companies. And we want to use PNM, the monopoly, essentially as their Southwestern platform, which is a government protected monopoly. No, they don't have any competition. And then I think squeeze out all the business and then sell all our renewables to, you know, California, Mexico, wherever else. And, you know, a bad answer. Like the answer he's supposed to give is, I'm coming here to serve PNM ratepayers, and not to exploit New Mexico and take all the money. And the commission found that they didn't have the resources to police, I think was literally the word that Commissioner Hall used, Avangrid and Iberdrola and their affiliate transactions. And, you know, one of the really brilliant things when I was briefing the final brief, and one of the questions was, when in a merger that you have to answer is, what is the purpose of the company that's seeking to merge, and how will the PNM ratepayers be protected? And I argued that I thought that they wouldn't be protected for a number of reasons, because of the unreliability and the fines and the fact that they were just so arrogant, and they just basically spent so much money here and thought, look, we got the money, we're going to own you, and that's all there is to say about it. But I was like, I think that there are rules here that you have to follow, and laws, and they couldn't, just like I said in the beginning, they couldn't overcome their track record. And the commission found that even though there were some benefits to the merger, which I would agree that there would have been some benefits, the risks and harms outweighed any benefits to the ratepayers. And that's what ultimately they found.
It sounds like they first of all ignored their own track record and came in with expectations that we were just going to roll over and play dead for them here in New Mexico. You
exactly.
know? And instead they met their Waterloo, I think.
Yeah. So what I learned in the merger case that, oh, by the way, just so you know, it's just a coincidence that when you're interviewing me now, today in Spain, the chairman of Iberdrola was on his way to court in a bribery and forgery case that's being investigated there. So that was definitely influential, I think, in the commission, because clearly, you know, being investigated at that level by the Supreme Court in Spain, I'm sure had an impact. It wasn't the defining factor. The other things that I mentioned just before were, but clearly it's a pattern that they violate the law. And, you know, there were $63 million worth of fines and penalties just in the last 5 years in their utilities in the East Coast. But they also violated the law here in New Mexico. And there were sanctions that were awarded against against Avangrid here for not
Right.
following the commission's own rules. And then meanwhile, like, you know, they say that the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. Well, the top dog at Iberdrola is being investigated for bribery and fraud right now. Like, there's a pending investigation. And today he went into, or maybe yesterday, went into the Supreme Court to answer questions.
Well, you know, the fish rots from the head.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah. I could not get over the arrogance of Avangrid when they just thought that they had this thing locked up. The advertising and you know, and the spreading of money around was just insane, as if it was a foregone conclusion that they were going to be, you know, in for business here.
Well, you know, I think that we talked about this a little bit last time, but, you know, that was another thing, which is that had me afraid, which is that, you know, PNM already has outsized influence in the legislature, right?
Oh, yeah.
But Iberdrola came in and paid Marcus Rael $350,000 to try to settle this case. Wow. And it was soon after Marcus Rael was hired, and he met with his buddy Hector Balderas and the other people from the Attorney General, while he was also working for the Attorney General, allegedly on behalf of the people of the state of New Mexico. So he was playing both sides. Marcus Rael was playing both sides. And that's not just my opinion. That's what ultimately was found by the hearing examiner and the PRC in this case, which was that he had what's called a concurrent conflict of interest, representing both sides of the matter, and was ultimately told that he could not, you know, the hearing examiner in the Avangrid case said, you cannot, you can no longer represent Iberdrola. But just think about that. I think he met with, I think the number was 18 times that Hector and Marcus Rael, or Marcus Rael and members of the AG's office met 18 times, and he was paid $350,000 an hour. $350,000. That's like more than $20,000 an hour or something. That's how much. That's the kind of money that Iberdrola, Avangrid have, and they can just do. They thought that when they got the, you know, Hector Balderas, the Attorney General, to sign on to the merger, it was going to be a cakewalk from there. But they had to, you know, deal with reality.
Well, I hope the voters remember that when Hector's name comes up.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be termed out, but you know, but yeah, but he might be seeking higher
off. That's right.
Yeah. You know, what I learned from the merger case was that if we're going to, I mean, I only learned it from the merger case, but I was trying to figure out, like, why does Avangrid and Iberdrola want PNM so badly? And what I really learned was that through a process, not just the merger, but because that question bubbled up for me as a political person, not just a lawyer representing new energy economy, was that if we're going to survive, and I mean that quite literally, we're going to have to electrify our transportation sector and our housing sector, because we can't rely on fossil fuels to burn, because because it's a climate catastrophe. Well, I would like to just show your listeners something, and that is that, first, that we're on the cusp of the fastest and deepest, most profound disruption of the energy sector in over a century, because we have to, if we're going to survive, make the transition as quickly as possible. And you know that the utilities are dragging their feet from fossil fuel dependence to renewable energy. Like most disruptions, this one is being driven by the convergence of several key technologies, obviously solar and wind, and the fact that the costs and capabilities have been improving on a consistent and predictable trajectories. So solar, wind, and storage are the cheapest form of energy there is. And I want to just show you, if I could share my screen. This was, oh, it says I can't share my screen, and you won't let me share my screen. Host.
And see, I don't have the documents. I would try and do it on my end.
Let me try one more time. Okay, no,
Let's
I'll
see.
just say what.
There's your white. Is it a whiteboard? No.
No, it's okay.
No.
I'll just tell you what it shows, but
Okay.
it's kind of cool. There was a document that was filed in California recently. I mean, specifically on December 14th, 2021, when the California Public Utility Commission asked, what is the electrification of transportation demand? Just that, not the housing sector. What is the projected demand? What does that look like? And what came back, the information that came back, was that California will need somewhere between 8 and 30 times its current electric need to deal with the electrification of its transportation sector.
Wow.
That's a lot. You know, California is the 4th greatest market in the world, right?
That's right.
So that's a lot of electricity that's going to be needed. So what happened, and so what Avangrid and Iberdrola wanted to do was take all of our renewable energy resources, which we basically have the best in the country. Texas technically does, but there's a law in Texas that 85% of Texas cannot export their energy. So we are the next best in the country in terms of the ability to export energy. I believe that if we had a public power, and I'm becoming more and more convinced that a state-owned public power, where the state would own the grid essentially, but make it a highway, like a 2-way highway, and anybody could just hop on for a toll, for a fee, that, you know, Albuquerque and Las Cruces, they could have their own energy generation for their own people and make money for themselves. And the state could provide some of that need that California is going to want, right? Which is clean energy, renewable energy to power their transportation market and their transportation needs. And so that could be a economic revenue, an economic engine for the state in perpetuity. And we could make a whole lot of money. And I
love the idea.
I
love it.
Yeah, I love the idea that the people of the state of New Mexico, whose resources this really belongs to, get the windfall, you know,
Exactly.
get the money. And then with that money, we could invest in things and not be 49th and 48th and 50th and, you know, in important metrics like health and education and et cetera. And instead of, you know, it being exploited by the Avangrid, Iberdrola, or any other multi-billion-dollar international corporation, what if those monies were repurposed back into our communities?
Sure. You know, it just makes perfect sense. Ever since I went solar in my home about, I guess it's been about 4 years ago now, you know, in increments, I've just been setting money aside to pull out the other old utilities that rely on fossil fuels and natural gas and replace them. So I've got my hot water tank out and replace it with an electric one. And this spring, the big job is going to be replacing my furnace. And I'm really excited about this because I don't want another bill from the gas company either. It's not doing me any good. It's not doing the environment any good, you know, and so that's the next project for me. And it just makes sense to let's go to renewable energy and use it like it's intended to be used.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it benefits everybody and the environment.
Yeah, I mean, they won't benefit the the 1% and and because those utility executives and the shareholders, that's the 1%, but it will benefit everybody else. It will benefit the state. It'll benefit our health. And yeah, I mean, I think we discussed what happened with Picaris Pueblo. I mean, they are serving their members with 100% solar energy and now storage. And whoever heard of lowering electric bills? But that's what they've done.
What a concept.
What a concept. And then still they're making money, and they're using those proceeds to do other things like language classes, like building a new welcome tourist center, like a new baseball field for the entire community. So it's building local wealth generation. That's what it is,
Human infrastructure. Yeah.
Exactly.
So look, we've only got about 4 minutes left, and we could go on forever. Time goes really, really fast. But what is this noise now about them trying to take this case to the Supreme Court in the state?
They have appealed to the Supreme Court. I don't know. I just think that they're in a tough position. I think that they're in a really tough position. First of all, just so you know, and if anybody wants to see it, the hearing examiner's incredible, scathing decision against Avangrid, was all what I said at the beginning, which is it's about he didn't think, and neither did I, that they were going to provide reliable service for ratepayers. That is the number one thing that the electric company has to do.
Sure.
The other thing that they have to do is they have to listen to their bosses, and their bosses are the regulators, and they didn't do that either. And so it's going to be a hard sell. I know that they want to go in and say, we're going to bring so much money to New Mexico. Well, I don't know how much money public power is going to bring money to New Mexico. That's what's going to bring money to New Mexico. Right. They were going to bring jobs, but I think that we can do that with public power. And I think that the U.S. Supreme Court, New Mexico Supreme Court is going to look at them and say, I don't think we want to overturn this. The agency that is in charge of overseeing the electric utilities and reliability, like the fundamental thing that it's supposed to do is provide electricity. And given that one of their affiliates, one of Avangrid's, where it has some utilities in the East Coast, they're number one in blackouts and brownouts.
Wow.
And
yeah,
that's it. That evidence is in the record. And so the thing is that I don't know that the Supreme Court's going to say, oh, PRC, you didn't do your job, and be wowed by some dollar signs, when the evidence is pretty scathing against them.
That's usually not a characteristic of a judicial system.
Yeah, and let's say they win, and I don't know what they haven't said what the basis of their appeal is, but let's say that they win. So in a year and a half from now, they'll get the right to reapply.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they're going to overcome whatever they didn't, and who knows what's going to happen in Maine. There's a $110 million conspiracy for fraud and bribery pending right now against Avangrid in federal court in New York for basically stealing from ratepayers. Who knows how that case is going to be resolved, and who knows what's going to happen in Spain. If those cases come down against Avangrid and Iberdrola, it doesn't matter what happens in the New Mexico Supreme Court. They're not going to welcome a company with that kind of track record.
We've got about 30 seconds left. And I wanted to ask you about the proposed hydrogen plant. If you can just give us just a highlight in 30 quick seconds, go for it.
Okay, so the thing is hydrogen is fossil fuel energy. It's fracked gas. And only 0.2% of hydrogen in the world is green. There is no green energy. The energy that is green, that is hydrogen, uses huge amounts of water. We don't have any water. There's not going to be green hydrogen here. It's not clean. And in fact, it's 20% more toxic, has more methane emissions than gas. So we have to oppose the hydrogen hub and that the governor wants, and we have to oppose having any kind of hydrogen here in New Mexico, because we need to reduce emissions, not increase them.
Sounds like we need to get a message out to the governor and fast on that one as well. Mariel Nanasi, thank you ever so much for taking this time. This has been a wonderful discussion. We're going to stay tuned because we know that there's still a lot of work to do in order to bring about a genuine new energy economy here in New Mexico and in the country for that matter. So thank you for all your great work.
And if people want to go to newenergyeconomy.org, we'll have information about hydrogen and the rest of the legislative session, including a study, a memorial to study public power. So thank you again.
Take such good care. We need you.
We need you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Be well.
We've got a lot to unpack today. We really do. And it's all to help us all become a lot smarter. Joining us on our panel today, back for another round, is our resident guru in legislative matters, Steve Cabiedes. Welcome back, Steve.
Thank you.
And our perennial thought leader here, our show's director, Tom Dent. Welcome back, Tom.
Hi, Jim.
And like I said, we've got a lot to talk about. And I just wanted to throw out corrections, the whole idea of corrections. That's a misnomer when you talk about the prison system. Corrections, there's no corrections going on. All they do is, train people to either want to stay in prison or become better criminals. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we're up against there, but I digress. Let's talk about redistricting. Steve?
Yes?
Yes.
What would you like to know?
Where are we with that now?
So, so we're at a place where the state legislature had its special session towards the end of December.
Right.
And they completed their work, which was they had to redistrict the Congress lines and the state and House state legislative lines and the public education district lines. And so that was completed, as well as all 33 counties, their county commission lines were done before the end of the year. So that's done. Some cities now, there's cities, there's school boards, there's special hospital districts, there's all kinds of other things that need to be done. But those really big ones are now taken care of by the state legislature. And there's been a lot of discussion about, I think especially on the congressional end,
sure,
as to what the new lines mean.
Well, I heard that State Senator Harold Pope was a little bit upset with how they wanted to redistrict his district.
Yeah, and in fact, we need to get him on the show at some point to talk about that, because he was even naming some names of culprits who were, trying to erase his district, and we can't let that happen.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot to work out. Are they still working on it, or is this a done deal?
It's done. It was all of the bills were done and signed by the governor. It had to be done, basically it had to be done by the end of the year,
right,
and it was done. There was, on the House side, the House lines, Speaker Egoff pretty much came in with a plan,
mm-hmm,
and there were no digressions from it. It was put right through. On the Senate side, there was a little bit of wrangling. about at the fringes of the native lands in Valencia County as to whether two Republicans in Valencia County would be kept in separate districts, or if we went with the native proposals to stop before you go further into Valencia County, and that would put the two Republicans together in the same district and leave a open district in the Grants area. And there was some back and forth between actually different Democratic groups proposed different things.
Right.
At the end of the day, the Native Coalitions group won with the bill that was originally sponsored by Senator Linda Lopez. So
Wow.
yeah, so that actually held. So that kind of coalition Republican thing didn't happen this time in the Senate, and I would say that the difference in that is the difference in both the three, what I call donkey fans, who were eliminated in 2000 with Papin, Mary Kay Papin in Las Cruces, John Arthur Smith down in Deming, and also who's the third one? Oh, Clemente Sanchez, and then also, oddly enough, I think Senator Martinez up in Española, who took himself out with a DWI issue. The replacement of all those, even though some of them were replaced by Republicans, the nature of the Democrats changed, and that may have been just enough to get that their lines passed. So that was one, I think, interesting consequence of getting some of the conservative Democrats out of the Senate.
Out of the Senate, yeah.
So
That's good.
the New Mexico State Legislature has been in session since last Tuesday, and the governor gave her State of the State address and proposed a budget somewhere between 84 million and $1 billion, and she wanted to allocate a lot for crime prevention. And like we talked with Mariel in the opening of the show, she wants to open this huge blue hydrogen burning plant in Grants, New Mexico.
Which is probably the dumbest thing that I've heard.
No, it is.
This is a state, this is a dry state.
It takes water we don't have. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's just kind of another way of replacing a coal plant and just with a
That's all
hydrogen
it is.
plant,
Yeah.
using the
Exactly.
same resources.
Yeah, yeah.
And they say that, we've got a fantastic amount of money and we really need to thank oil and gas, but we really need to switch from oil and gas and get Avangrid out of the state and start a state co-op and put solar panels and wind power everywhere and generate our own energy.
And interestingly enough, I saw that Senator Joseph Cervantes, who's the chairman of the Senate Conservation Committee, who usually is not friendly to conservation-style issues, actually said that he's kind of leaning no on this bill.
Good.
So that's very
Good.
interesting.
Let's hope he holds the line on that. you
Right.
know? That's right. That's right. So we do know that PNM and Avangrid are going to the state Supreme Court. They're just upset, and I heard just yesterday that the chief executive officer of their parent company in Spain was headed into court just yesterday, facing criminal charges over there that are just pretty telling in terms of what we could expect. And Avangrid, is already in for about $64 million in fines just from the East Coast alone. So we are counting on the Supreme Court in all of its wisdom to make certain that they decide that what the commission did in saying no is going to stand, and tell Avangrid to go home and leave us alone.
Yeah, I think the process that happened was completely above board. I don't know how they can sue and win on this one.
Exactly.
By the way, you talk about $64 million. I think that's what they have invested in TV commercials here during this whole thing too.
Oh, yeah.
So
And I saw a couple trucks go by.
So yeah, I don't think they're going to succeed at the New Mexico Supreme Court, which will be great. The thing that I worry about is we've come to the end of an elected Public Regulation Commission, and beginning at the end of 2021, some of the PRC members will have expired their term, and it will be up to the governor to appoint replacements. I have a lot of concern about who she's going to replace them with, if they're going to be very pro-corporate, fossil fuel.
Right.
And we need to, I think this is something we need to be aware of and campaign on, so that when the beginning of the year comes and the appointments happen, that the energy's there. The energy is there for someone
to make something
to have
happen, right.
a more renewable friendly person on the boards.
Yeah, well, the governor and Speaker Egoff have always been a little bit pro oil and gas, there's a lot of fairly high up people that were taken in by Avangrid and kind of like the whole idea. The governor, Hector Valderas, Egoff, and a number of people.
Well, you know, in the minute that we've got left, one of the things I want to put in a plug for in the name of transparency is I'd like to see a study done over the next year that reveals, you know, who's got investments, you know, particularly in the energy industry that's in our state government, and what those investments look like. Because you know that those folks are always going to vote their pockets.
And do I have time to plug the music that's coming up?
Plug the music.
Okay,
we
going to
got
be
45 seconds.
Listening to Bonnie Blume and the Oxford family performing on the stage of the Peace Center back in 2008, and the song is called Man in Mexico.
Wow. We zipped through that real fast, didn't we?
Yeah.
All right. Steve Cabiedes, Tom Dent, thank you so much. And we're a lot smarter as a result of this discussion.
Thanks, Steve.
We never did quite figure out treacherous and lovers turn to foes. But I love the man in Mexico, wherever he goes. I love my man in Mexico. I love my man in Mexico. I love my man in Mexico. Wherever he goes. Thank you.
Until the next time, it's time to say goodbye. When you out here in the streets, keep it real, 505. We love everybody, we just want to let you know. Thanks for tuning in to that Saturday show.